tradition has a very important role to play. It speaks to questions of identity.
Yeah.
And those are very critical,
I like that.
you know.
I like that because when we talk identity, who are you if you can't be identified?
Exactly. And you see, the unfortunate part, I think, is that heritage has been used, or tradition and culture has been used as a tool for division
Yeah.
for so long, you know. Whether you speak apartheid, you speak colonial times, even pre-colonial, if you will.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for people to also get to the place where they're able to say, who am I and what are those markers that I'm willing to take?
Yeah.
Because there are many things that can define us. You know, even within manhood, there are so many different sects or different ways.
Yeah.
Even within blackness, there are so many different things. You know, when you speak about being a Motswana, for instance, you know, there are all these different
and there are various
groups.
dialects that
Absolutely.
the Matswana people themselves can
Yes.
differentiate each other.
Exactly. I mean, and those things, again, at the base, you can say, oh, Motswana. But there are different ways that you do it, different colors, different traditions. And I think it's like that across the board because people are ingenious, people are creative, people will come up with different ways, will move from here, you know, and the Ramadwa people who are here will wear blue because of a particular reason. But the Ramadwa who are up north will wear green because of a particular reason. But they are both Ramad. So we must get to the place of understanding what makes them Ramadwa.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
was
those are
having
questions.
a conversation with my son a few days ago.
Sure.
And I said to him, do you know which generation you belong within the Ramadwa clan? And he did not know. And I looked at it and I thought, but how did I ask that question when I had not actually spoken about it with him?
Exactly.
And when I started counting, I realized he's in the 5th generation.
Yeah.
And so when I spoke about that, he said to me, so you're saying I'm the 5th generation. Who are the other generations going back? And we started having that conversation. But here is the most important thing for me. If, as people, we begin to embrace our own heritage, does it have to wait for a specific day?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And you see, this is a thing that we don't necessarily realize, but our practices, our customs are everyday life things.
Yeah.
We make big events of them, but they're everyday life things. If you will, and you have a culture or a heritage of prayer, that's an everyday thing.
Yeah.
If you slaughter, it could be an everyday thing if you have the, you know, capability to do so. But birth, death, rites of passage, manhood, womanhood, these are common things that are happening. And even the way we dress and the way we, you know, perceive ourselves, as it were, from that sense, shouldn't wait for a particular day. I mean, I look like this every day.
I've seen that when I actually went onto your into your Facebook page because I needed to get an understanding of who my guest is.
Exactly. So it's and it's those things that you'll get weird stares. People will look at you as though, oh my gosh, what is this? But then there'll be other people who will say, you know, this is actually challenging me. You know, to say what makes a suit formal and this not.
This week I saw a picture on I think it was on Twitter. There's a picture of a couple dressed in white, not white, but white wedding gowns.
Yes.
And the suit and all that.
Yes.
And then there is another picture of a traditionally Zulu bride and the groom.
Yeah.
And someone was saying, until sometime, one of us would get to realize that both of these are traditional weddings.
Correct. And it speaks to that point that I was saying earlier, is that we're opting out of our own into another without actually acknowledging it.
Yeah.
You know, without actually paying attention to saying, but what makes me who I am?
Yeah.
And once I've discovered who I am, how do I preserve that? How do I protect that?
Yeah.
We are where we are today because of the loss of that culture, because of the loss of who we are, where it's easy now for people to just take on new identities.
Yeah.
You know.
But as South African people, collectively, what is our heritage?
You see, it's a very loaded question. Ndade Ramadwa, we could both be excommunicated and imprisoned for the answer to that question, because it is heavy.
Yeah.
Issues of identity as a nation of South Africa are very hard. because we are not a homogeneous society.
Yeah.
You know, and so if you say that our identity is made up, like, you know, we have the coat of arms, a unity in diversity, as it were.
Yeah.
At some point, you risk having a catch-all or an umbrella.
Yeah.
That won't make sense. You know,
True.
you're going to start replacing Heritage Day with Bride Day.
And which is what has actually been in some point, at some point, that was a
Yes.
suggestion.
Yes.
And it resonated so much with many other people.
Yes.
Even though some people did not accept that it was. But if you look at how it goes, Heritage Day is generally, whether it's African and all that, you will see people crying.
Yes. and I think also we didn't, what's the word? We didn't account that, or rather we haven't spoken enough perhaps about how, and again, this is opening up another can of worms, but historically speaking and linguistically, Afrikaans as a heritage and a language was here before the Dutch arrived.
Yeah.
At a historical level.
Yeah.
So to a certain extent, and people might differ with me, it's a black language.
Yeah.
In its genesis.
True.
And because it's a black language, therefore then we can say that the culture itself, though it has been Dutchified, the concept of building on a fire or cooking on a fire, braaiing and so, fine, we can say it's African, it's not a problem. And many other cultures around the world do that. But now, what makes the braai better than Khmer, than to brew traditional beer, than to yes, and we should explore those things. I think we should be able to say, okay, how do we bring others along? That's the thing. Is that we shouldn't get to the place where we're having a majority sort of society where we can acknowledge difference, but we bring everybody along. And we say, yes, you are Zulu. Tell us about you being Zulu. I'm Motswana. Tell me about that. But also, let's then come together and discover what makes us uniquely South African. Because I don't think we know that.
No, I also could be in the same line with you. I don't think we understand each other, because if we do understand each other, we would not actually have all these other stripes that we have amongst ourselves as individual groupings from within the same country.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, take it a little bit more broadly, people, there are superiorities and inferiorities between
just talk about the presidency of the country.
Yeah.
That becomes
you know, and people forget that if we say, and it's again to this identity point, if you start at the perspective of, say, we're human beings.
Yeah.
Then what's next? Are you going to get into gender?
Yeah.
Are you going to get into class? Are you going to get into ethnicity or culture?
Yeah.
And all of those then become differentiating things. But if we start focusing on what unites us, what makes us better, what makes us more progressive as a people, but acknowledging that there's difference. And difference shouldn't be something, at least in our generations, we have people who think about difference as something to be ostracized and taken out there, that we must all be the same. You know, if we're not all liberal, or if we are not all woke, if we are not all this, you know, then it's a problem. But there's space for people to be conservative.
Yeah.
There's space for people to be whatever it is that they want to be. No identity should infringe on the other. And that's the kind of heritage I think we should have.
So when we talk, and I think this will actually talk about towards the end of the show, because at the end of the show, we need to be actually bringing up and trying to find out exactly how do we craft this going forward. But I was touched by some of the issues that you have actually mentioned. It looks like as people, we have embraced certain aspects of heritage, but we have rejected certain aspects of heritage. Like for example, when you started, you mentioned the issues of language. And when it comes to language, it seems like people are holding back. There are very few people who are actually going all out to learn other languages, so that even when I meet Botswana people, I should be comfortable around them and not feel like I'm being isolated.
It's true.
And if you find yourself in Venda, you should be able to identify with those people. But it looks like when it comes to language, I don't know whether the influence of our institution or the institutions of higher learning is actually playing a role? I don't know. What do you think?
Sure. And it's a multi-layered question because, I mean, you have all sorts of institutions that are acting in that space. You have the Pan-South African Language Board. You have language units within departments. You have institutions that are there. But I also think that it first begins with a pride around the language.
Yeah.
And a willingness to do the work to preserve and augment the language. And I think in that regard, we really can take a leaf out of the Afrikaner playbook.
Yeah.
Because there is a concerted effort funded by Afrikaners for Afrikaner preservation to say this is our heritage, this is our culture, this is our language, and we'll develop the language. Afrikaans was not where it is today, perhaps 100 or so years ago. It wasn't.
Not at all.
And we have got to maybe get to the place where we perhaps stop bemoaning the state or the dying, if you will, of our languages and say, what can we do?
Yeah.
What can we do to preserve them? How can we make sure that they are better?
People would argue and say, but the Afrikaners had an advantage, an added advantage, because their language was taught across the ethnic groups of South Africa, and which made it much more popular and all these kind of things. But I think what you are talking about is critical, because regardless of what happened, but they took an initiative to preserve the language.
Absolutely. So when we think about the machinery that Afrikaners used, it's a machinery that they used on purpose.
Yeah.
There was a concerted effort to doing so.
A serious intention.
Yeah. So unless or until we get serious around that, especially in terms of languages, because there are some that are dying, in fact.
You know what I love about Afrikaners? I'm just going to say this just randomly like that. What I love about them is that they have also influenced the black farming community to embrace the clothing of the Afrikaners, the farmers themselves.
Yes,
because even a normal African livestock farmer,
he wears the khakis.
Now he wears the khakis because it feels more like that is the dress code of farmers.
And also, I mean, and that's the influence, as it were, of language, because we borrow terms, right? Across languages, there are terms that are borrowed from Afrikaans because language develops among people. You know, for instance, the proper word for a farmer in Setswana, kimulimi, a person or lima. But there are people who would call themselves maburu, you know, a bull. and it's particularly interesting to me, you know, no one uses the word letlabapefo. No, kill a fenster. And there's fun fenster from a window. And these are all examples about how you have the influence of other cultures and groups on us. But I wonder whether it goes the other way around as well.
It does.
And that's where the problem is.
I mean, I taught Afrikaans for a very long time, and I can't remember from that dictionary finding a word that was actually brought in through one of the African languages.
I mean,
except these days for a word like tsotsi. When they bring it into their literature, it's just for inclusivity purposes. But they do have a word similar to that.
Diff. But and you see, and it's good for us to perhaps use the Afrikaner model as an example, because there's an effort around preservation, and there's an effort around language development. But where it goes wrong is an effort around exclusivity. And that's where I think we run the risk of not being able to meet each other halfway. Because if I can say Tchaikovsky and Rachmaninoff and Chopin, those are composers of other descent. You should be able to say Ngulunga. You should. We have the same mouth.
Exactly.
You should be able.
Are the same.
Yes, you should be able to say Patuchedzo. You must say Katlego. And I think, frankly, we've got to admit very honestly that there's a laziness amongst people groups across the board. There are some people who live in different provinces who will say, you know, I just know one language.
The other day, we were amongst groups of people of different cultural groupings. And this particular one was reading the names. Now, and all those names were African names. And then she had to come to a particular name.
Yeah.
And she said, this one I'm not even going to try and pronounce. That's laziness.
Exactly.
What you're
Exactly.
talking about.
Exactly. And I mean, you see, I would much rather forgive you having tried.
Yeah.
And then I correct you. And then you are able to say, you know, my language doesn't have these clicks.
Yeah.
But actually, I can train it. Because the tongue is malleable. You can do it. You can
True.
get there if you want to. The proof is in the pudding of many, many white people who speak Venda, who speak Xhosa, who speak isiZulu,
Exactly.
who speak...
And with all the clicks that
Absolutely.
are necessary in that way.
If you listen to them and you turn away, you wouldn't even
You
say.
would not know.
You know, and also some of us have prided ourselves in being able to speak Afrikaans fluently.
Yeah.
Or to speak English fluently. But at a point, we've got to understand, as much as I love languages, ke Motswana.
Yeah.
You know,
and that is not going to change.
No, and so when I come and speak Setswana, I'm not being exclusive. I'm just being who I am.
Yeah.
And in being who I am, now you shouldn't feel threatened by that.
Yeah.
You know, there should be no point where you begin to say, oh no, you are being exclusive. Oh no, you are being funny.
You know, a few years ago, I met a friend, and we were talking about culture and heritage. And I'm saying this because we are just about to close the segment. You know, and she said, many people don't know exactly where they come from.
Yes.
And the kind of inheritance in terms of wealth creation they have within their lineage.
Correct.
And she said she actually went on to track the first Ramadwa. How did he actually make a living?
Exactly.
And then the next one, how did they make a living? And if you look at that lineage, you will be able to pinpoint to say, what is it that we have inherited? And that's spoken less much about it.
Absolutely. Because if you, and maybe let me go there, if you bring it into the spiritual or churchy realm, everyone is going to talk about generational curses.
Yeah.
Fine. We can get rid of them. We can block them in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Yeah.
But what about the generational blessings?
Exactly.
What about the purpose that God has for a particular family?
For a particular family.
And we know that purpose is a family endeavor because we see that in the Bible.
Yeah.
We've convinced ourselves, and it's fine, that purpose is an individualistic pursuit. But when we locate it within family, then we begin to speak about family inheritance.
Commonality within.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't have a family where everyone is a doctor and think that's by accident.
No.
It's not going to happen like that. There's a healing mandate. There's a healing purpose. Now, if you move away from medicine, and medicine is the particular place where it is that God had provided for you to be, you're going to want inheritance where there was none for you.
Where there isn't. And that's where you will actually find yourself struggling.
Absolutely.
Sure. Let us take a short break. When we come back, we delve into the negligence of this inheritance, the areas of heritage. We are about to just go all out for a break, and I believe that you will join us when we come back. Pastor Mohase and I are not going anywhere, so you shouldn't. Thank Welcome back to Resuscitation Leadership Conversations. My name is Maano Ramadwa. I'm sitting and enjoying the Sunday afternoon with Pastor Katleho Mohase. We are talking about issues of heritage, and does heritage still have an opportunity in this modern day? We are breaking it down. So here we are. There are issues that when we talk about heritage, we have just spoken about the issues of language.
Sure.
And some of these languages are basically facing extinction because there is not much research that is actually coming out of such languages.
Yeah.
And sometimes simply because many people are no longer speaking about them.
Yeah.
But
or even speaking them.
Exactly. How much of a risk are we actually doing when we are embracing more of the other languages as part of the inheritance of other people, while neglecting our own, to a point where our children, some people will say children don't actually, and I'm one of those who has actually been found in that space, where my children, because of where I spend most of my time, they rarely speak Chivenda.
Correct.
And how much of a risk are we actually playing in that kind of situation where our children may not end up speaking our languages?
I mean, at an academic level, if you just take a look at the numbers, Ntate Ramadwa, around Siswati home language, Isindebele home language, Sitsonga, Chivenda home language, at an enrollment level, at DBE in matric, the numbers are not looking too good. In terms of people taking the language at a home language level. Forget first additional as well, that the numbers become far, far less.
Exactly.
And the languages are under threat also because I think at a point we've convinced ourselves that English is the common language. Right? No one actually goes to investigate whether that's true or not. The most spoken language in South Africa at the moment is isiZulu. According to statistics.
Exactly.
So actually, a lot of our business in the country should be conducted in isiZulu. English, I think, is about the second or third most spoken language. And at that level, you begin to see just how implicit the influence of sort of foreign or colonizing agents, if you will, on their former colonies still is. Because if you have all these official languages and we made it, it's a stupid example. Our president is a polyglot. He's multilingual. He can speak many, many languages. Would there be a problem if he conducted the State of the Nation?
Not really. There shouldn't be.
They shouldn't.
They shouldn't be, because in Parliament,
there are translators.
I listened to from, with the Freedom Front Plus.
Yes.
I've listened from General Constant Feliu. They would speak in Afrikaans.
Absolutely.
And we got to a point where there would be subtitles for those who cannot actually understand the language.
Yes.
And but you find that we are so much going into the accommodative frame of doing things.
And who are we accommodating, really?
That's the problem.
I mean,
and here is an old lady in a deep rural venue who happens to have DSTV because the son is in Johannesburg.
Yes.
And she wants to hear the State of the Nation.
I mean, and for me, it's a very sad thing to acknowledge that Ramadwa, when family meetings, and you tune in, and I sometimes listen, and I want you tune into our vernacular radio stations. Let's not get into trouble. You tune into our vernacular radio stations. You are hearing the speech as it's being read in English. These are vernacular radio stations that employ people to translate.
And they should.
And they should be translating. Yes. There's absolutely nothing wrong. The president can begin, fellow South Africans, Ma Afrika Borwa mantle. That's exactly what should be happening.
That's what we do in church.
But at a government level, somewhere, and it's pleasing to see the sign language interpretation, and that's great. But somehow we've thought, no, let's just go with the English. And even in corporate South Africa, sometimes people look at you funny because I sometimes have this habit, and I work at a particular institution. I begin my emails with Dumelang. And I end with Kia Leboch. As a standard. And people look at me very funny because that's not part of the language policy.
It's not the decorum.
And again we must ask the question, is it decorum or is it whiteness?
Exactly. Because and in that way, when people want to sort of exclude you, they'll say this is the decorum of our emails and all that. And yet we are talking to people who, in all fairness, within the organization, there could be certain people who don't know how to speak English.
And also, if I greet you and I say Dumelang and I end my email with Kia Leboch, inadvertently I've taught you how to say hello and
Yeah.
thank you in my language.
Exactly.
If you respond by saying sawubona or whatever your language is, we have now embarked on a cultural exchange without even knowing it.
Without knowing it.
Just reducing us, just at salutations level. Don't
Yeah.
get into technical issues in the language, because then you are being exclusionary. But just to greet, just to be able to say, okay, this is who I am. Who are you? Because the accommodation that we are doing, it doesn't serve us. It doesn't even serve, because there's no accommodation at a large school in Ing. But there's accommodation at the Tutomangmang Secondary. Why? What is that accommodation? Because we are speaking in English as though there's something. No, we should have developed our languages to the point where we can teach maths in Sichuan. We can teach science in Sichuan. And the words are there. The vocabulary exists.
It's just it's like there is some kind of fear that if we do this, we may end up not getting enrollments and things like that. I don't understand how.
It would be such a pleasure for me to see the president go to China and have an interpreter who knows Chinese and he's speaking in Chivenda to the Chinese president.
Exactly.
Or there is somebody, for instance, Minister Pando Kimutswana that she would be able to speak to Prime Minister Johnston, who would have to have an interpreter sourced here in South Africa to say, no, we're going to speak our languages. We're not going to say we want to acclimatize or assimilate, because these world powers are not going to assimilate.
And the Chinese don't
They
do
don't.
that.
The French don't. The Russian don't. Who are we accommodating? Because it seems it's just Africans who do this.
Is it an issue of us viewing ourselves as underdogs?
We need to get rid of that perception completely. We need to get rid of it wherever it raises its head, because I think it would be incredibly important for us to get to the place where we're able to say, this is who we are. We're unapologetically like this. And now, how do we take that forward? How do we, because you see, we can only be accommodating when the other party also takes a step. But the other parties are not taking steps. And we have moved so far.
Maybe because we project ourselves as beggars to them.
Absolutely.
And they feel, if you're begging, then surely you should actually come down to a level lower than me.
Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with a president going to the UN General Assembly that's just concluded and speak in Kiswahili. And let other people interpret.
Let's talk about the preservation that we were talking about. I don't know many of those places where our heritage is actually put to preservation, where our children across the country would be able to, even when they are in Cape Town, they are able to source information from a centralized place, information that is vendor information, or any other information, Chitsonga and so forth. I don't understand that. This week I played one of the Chivenda songs of all times, and I was laughing because within the song there were issues that were being taught, issues of unity amongst people who are in polygamous families, and my question was, so this is how the music was used,
correct,
to try and unite families who could potentially have been fighting and things like that. So why have we sort of lost that as the people?
I think my answer would be two-pronged. You know, in the one instance, I think that we've got to assist our Department of Sport, Arts and Culture as families in order to say, as the Mohase family, who are we? It would be very interesting. I think it would be a public good if, for instance, the Department of Home Affairs was to say family members could receive a free family tree that is sourced by the department, because the department is the keeper of origins and identity. So if you were able to go to the department and say, okay, I want a list of all the Ramadwas and how they are related. So you'd be able to track, okay, this is where I am, this is my father, those are his parents, those are the siblings, those are the people who married in, and to make that service available. Imagine what it would do to the next generation who's able to access that information quickly. because then you are able to build that heritage and that
Out of
archive.
Yeah.
I also think that families have got to do this by themselves.
Yeah.
We've got to be able to say, for instance, even in our praise songs, so our oral literature speaks about that. We've got to be able to say, okay, as a Mohase, who are we?
Yeah.
What does it mean to say, Mutwabo Setebit, or Pulla Ditlad, or Khamela Mutwe? What is that? And be able to document that in books and say, this is the Mohase way of doing things. And that fits, again, into the Botswana way of doing things, and so forth. Because if we really say we're going to leave it to government, I can promise you, say, we're going to be discussing this thing 20 years from now, and we'll be at the same place.
And unfortunately, by then, the numbers would have actually dwindled.
Yes, and not because there's no willingness to preserve it. Because it's a very funny thing that happens. You know, during Heritage Month, people are often dumbfounded by just how little they know or we know about our cultures, about African history, about just our own selves. And we get pleasantly surprised. We become so enamored with our cultures again. You know, it's like when September comes, we romance this idea of, you know, looking like this every day. And then something switches off on the 1st of October.
Exactly.
And we're like, you know what? Yeah, it was nice to have that little romance, but now we're back. And I think that if we were able to say that, let's challenge the so-called decorum of corporate South Africa. Let's allow, because I promise you, there's nothing more formal than our own traditional attire.
No.
If I'm wearing mudiangeo, the hot, as a sort of blanket and the hat, and I come into the office and I say dumelang, at a spiritual level, I'm addressing not just yourself. And it's not just me addressing you, but my entire family is addressing your entire family. It's not good morning.
Exactly. And you're not hearing from one individual.
Yes.
You're hearing from the entire
the tribe itself is saying good morning to you. It's saying, how are you? And not just at an individual level. How are all of you?
But lack of knowledge also is creating some kind of challenge. Remember the issue that happened in Midrand? The gentleman who was dressed up in his
it was in the belly attire.
Was actually just bashed and expelled from a mall. Just like that.
And we've got to get to the place. For instance, and it's a bad issue, talking about our dress code. Virgins and young girls across all cultures are barely dressed. Barely. Nakedness is associated with that because you have nothing to hide. You are pure in that sense. So that's the cultural concept of it. You belong to your family, but also your family is proud of the fact that you are still this virgin, and so there's nothing for us to hide. But because of hypersexualization, you then have a view where people now would not want to have their breasts out. But that's traditionally acceptable.
And nobody ever questioned that. And
no.
The rate of the scourges that we are seeing now was almost non-existent.
And also because another thing that we don't want to admit is that heritage comes with different justice and different judicial systems. Yes, prejudicial to women in certain respects, and I think those things can be worked on. But I think that at a cultural level, we've got to agree that there are some things that we need to take from these, if you will, African judicial systems and import them into what we're calling the South African judicial system. Because there were ways of dealing with men who wanted to abuse their women that never made them abuse again. And yes, you can speak about underreporting, and that's fine. But our heritage speaks about women in a particular way. Our heritage speaks about men in a particular way. And we've got to be able to get to the place where we preserve our language, we preserve our culture, not just for us, but with the understanding also that these are deeply spiritual things that if we don't preserve, we'll find ourselves a few generations from now all speaking English and having audiobooks such a vendor.
Songs which played a lot of educational support to people who did not understand what their culture was all about, or even those that knew but which consolidated their knowledge out of the musical
Yeah.
frame of things, nobody wants to play such kind of songs except during this time.
But you see, and that there was a man, we didn't like him very much at a certain public institution, and he said he wanted a particular number of local music to be played across specific stations.
I remember that. I remember that.
And, you know, it's particularly interesting how, yes, it was sudden. Yes, maybe there was not enough consultation. Yes, it was whatever the reason might have been, and we get that. But it starts with acknowledging that in the US, they play US music.
Yeah.
In the majority.
Exactly.
In other countries, they play that music in the majority. You've got to build audiences. So institutions that are set up to do that exist in government.
Yeah.
They exist in public spaces. We've got to utilize them to saying, let's have plays, let's have music that we are all going to promote.
Yeah.
You know, and we are going to say that, yes, we're going to watch this, we're going to have this at free-to-air times or whatever, so that we can preserve that. Because the unfortunate part is that we also think that the compositions have stopped.
Yeah.
That music is gone.
Yeah.
That we're no longer going to
And
have
people
that.
are composing.
They are.
Yeah.
And we must acknowledge folklore is moving. It's not static.
Yeah.
So while some may want to speak about a time where, you know, Indoda would say Gukale Sami Skatul.
Yeah.
Perhaps there's someone who's composing a song that now speaks about actually whose shoe is better looking.
Yeah.
Ugutikale. and then we can get to the place of whose shoe must actually be listened to.
Yeah.
But that's a dynamic of the egalitarian, the feminist society that we're in, and songs reflect the time that they are in. We can't even say that we're going to exclusively remove. No, we have a history.
Yeah.
How do we preserve it?
You're right. The other day I was listening to one international musician, and he was being asked on radio, national radio, to say, but what is it that you actually like about South Africa? He mentioned a lot of things. And they asked, what is it that you, at this stage, do not like about South Africa? He said, ever since I came down from the airport, when I got into the Uber, the music that I heard reminded me of home. And then I moved into the hotel. Whatever setup that was there was my home setup. So far, I have not actually experienced your country.
And I think
that's an embarrassment.
Maybe let me ask the question, that Ramadwa. What does 5-star luxury accommodation look like in a traditional sense?
Beautiful stuff.
What would that actually look like? Because if you speak about, you know, beds and so forth and all of that, fine. Maybe we slept on the floor.
Yeah.
We had mats, you know, bolao and so forth.
Yeah.
But is that an experience that we could give to international tourists and say, no, this is 5-star, but it is premised on Setswana living.
Yeah.
It is luxurious, but it is premised on Setswana living. It's like we don't have a concept of black luxury.
Yeah.
Or of an excellence.
No.
That
It's based on, you know, one leather there.
Yes. I mean, as though we didn't have beautifying things, we didn't have aesthetics. It's, you know, to say, for instance, cuisine, fine dining, is often international.
Someone in Soweto, in fact, not just someone, but two gentlemen that I know in Soweto started those two restaurants, and it's beautiful.
And also,
and people are coming in to experience that.
So we've got to, and the only way of actually getting out of the inferiority is to first admit that we have it.
Yeah.
That we don't view ourselves as equal or as, you know, superior.
Yeah.
Because if we don't admit it, I'm going to speak like this now, but when you get to my house, it's going to be very white.
Yeah.
And so I speak one thing in public, but in private, I don't believe it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to seek out more African-esque things that are of equal power to the others. And I think that's where it starts. We've got to be able to say, fine, yes, maybe we lived in huts and certain versions of huts and so, but Are you saying there were no flowers?
Yeah.
Are you saying there was nothing to beautify? Because if you are saying you took cow dung to actually make the floor smooth, that's beautification.
And it was beautiful.
Yes, it's aesthetics.
It was beautiful.
And how do we bring that in? You know, we can't just speak about you have the Ndebele paintings. It's a language. It's an alphabet, actually.
Yeah.
That's there.
Exactly.
You know, and how do you bring that into your house without acknowledging? Uguti, no, firstly, it is superior. It is worth being here.
Yeah.
You know, and across cultures, there's writing, there's painting, there's all sorts of stuff. And those things need to be brought into our homes so that we can be able to say, yes, this is a template that's African, or a template that's Setswana, or a template that's Chivenda. But I'm proud of this template.
You touched on folklore. And very few people or authors these days are delving into that space. And as a result of that, we are running short of material that can be taught to young people.
Yeah.
That is not just relevant, but that is actually moving with the times for them to understand.
Yeah.
What's the problem here? Are we saying that the brain drain that we had has actually gone all of it, and we don't know, we don't have anyone else that have stepped into the picture?
Oh, absolutely not in that Ramadwa. There are many children's books specifically. I asked a friend and writes in Xhosa and isiZulu, and I said, can you please show me some cartoons that are available on YouTube in our local languages? And right there was a problem. So on the one hand, you're going to tell your child, be proud of being Movenda. And then the child is going to be like, okay,
give me
give me Venda cartoons. Give me, you know, because I'm young. I want to see. I want to be. It is such a small amount. And it costs so much money to do. But the fact that they are available in English means that somebody decided that it's important to invest in it. And we can't, again, let's leave the government out of this. Let people come together and say, we want to invest in this thing. You know, I think it's the Afrikaner Taal en Kultuurvereniging, the ATKV. They purpose to invest in cultural preservation, specifically around linguistic and cultural development. So we need a Botswana language and cultural union. And all of these things seem to have existed in some form or other, but we need to resuscitate them, we need to capacitate them, and give them more money, and give them actual support, and not lip service.
I'm glad you have actually mentioned it. We need to resuscitate them. And when we come back, we are going to deal with that part of resuscitation. How do we do that? This is how we actually close off this segment. But when we come back, we are continuing with the conversation with Pastor Katleho Muhase, talking about the issue of heritage. Do you want to start a creche or a daycare center? Or maybe you and your staff want to improve your skills and qualifications in early childhood development? EduBuild Institute Thoyando campus is your answer. We have 20 years experience in skills development and offer professional training courses for ECD level 4 and 5. You don't need prior training or even matric certificate to register. Our classes are on Saturdays at TCN Center in Zwerani. Upon completion, you will be registered with the South African Council of Educators, or SAIS in short. Registration for 2022 is open. Remember, no matric certificate is required. Call us on 068-392-1730, or you can WhatsApp us on the same number, 068-392-1730. EduBuild Institute, Thoyando campus, situated at TCN Center, Zwerani. EduBuild. Reach, teach, and build a child today. Welcome back to Resuscitation Leadership Conversations. I'm still sitting with my guest, Pastor Katleho Muhase. We are talking about issues of heritage. And just before, we were talking about how to resuscitate. And you've got a formula?
I don't. I think in all fairness, and it sounds very bad
Yeah.
to say, but can the Afrikaners just give us their playbook?
Can they just hand over their
if they can hand
booklet?
over that booklet that they used
The model itself.
and you replicate. And now, of course, people are going to say, but yeah, we don't have the resources to do that. Organizations that are being run in that space are actually publicly funded.
Yeah.
And that's where the rubber meets the road, is that we've got to be able to say, if we want this to happen, we've got to put our money where our mouth is.
Yeah.
We've got to be able to say, what is important to us? If for instance, you have, and let me use this example, you have soccer teams from specific localities.
Yeah.
And those soccer teams are said to carry the hopes of those people in the PSL, as it were.
Yeah.
And is there, of necessity, a way in which those teams can get involved in cultural preservation? Absolutely.
Yeah.
They could the coach could take a decision with every interview that I do, because I come from this particular locality and my language is under threat. I'm going to speak in that language.
A couple of years ago, we had a player who, by any chance, he could not express himself in English.
Yeah.
And he expressed himself in Isuzu.
Yes.
And he was bashed all over. But when you look at the Lionel Messi's of this world, when they speak, what's this one who joined Manchester?
Ronaldo.
Ronaldo. They're not compromising. They're not speaking any English. They're speaking their mother tongue.
It's that inferiority again. Sir.
Yeah.
That's the way. You see, the place where we deal with it is to be able to say, first, I am who I am.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be proud of that. When we get there, then we'll be able to say, if you are being interviewed on whatever platform, and it sounds like we're being hypocritical in that we're speaking in English right now, right?
Yeah.
But if we were to change the conversation and you were to try the interview in Chivenda and I answered in Setswana, we'd make headway.
Yeah.
We would continue, because the issue is not the platform, the issue is not the willingness, but it is, are we able to move from the perspective that says we are inferior to a perspective that says we actually are equal to everyone else. We're not trying to get a superiority going here. No, we are equal to everybody else. And secondly, are we able to then infiltrate every single societal space to be able, at a language preservation level at least, to have that? Now, people are going to say, but no, yes, Pansalb exists. There are different chapters across the country. You have news in different languages that is there. I agree.
Yeah.
Is it enough? No.
Not really.
Not nearly.
Yeah.
Because we've got to get people away from the perspective that says English is better. And I mean, if we came to a heritage conversation and it's funded and it's good, we're able to have the conversation. You ask in Chivenda, I answer in Setswana. We put subtitles in English there and we leave it.
Exactly.
Because we've got to be able to say, okay, how do we make this practical? It begins by parents also being able to say, I'm guilty. I have not taught my child the language, and it's okay. Now I'm going to be better.
I'm going to invest my time
and
energy making sure that this child knows this language. Not just the language, but all aspects of the language.
Absolutely. So we can do that, and we should. So let's not get caught up in the guilt of saying our children don't speak our languages properly. Let's start today. Let's get a tutor. You know, I'm at the place where, yes, I've taught myself more and more how to speak Setswana properly. But I want to be able to write the Setswana home language matric exam and pass it with a distinction. I want to be able to write it and have a teacher mark it, and they say, you know what, on all three papers, creative writing, literature, and language, you passed, and you passed well. And that's a measure for me.
This is very interesting. And so there is an element of resources that needs to be committed.
Absolutely.
Across the board.
Publicly.
Just to ensure that people who have an interest.
Yes.
Maybe even the literature that people are writing.
Mm.
The government should actually, or organizations should be able to sponsor such writings and say, let's distribute to learners. Let it become a resource for them to read,
Absolutely.
even during their spare time.
Absolutely.
And because some of these issues need to be ventilated in the same material.
Yes.
The pride of
Yes.
the Botswana
Yeah.
in the book.
Yeah.
Communicated in that sense. Because if we don't do that, our chances of resuscitating that become minimal by then.
And I mean, if you take a look at these online streaming platforms, there's dramas around Japanese literature, South Korean heritage and custom, American, British, French. When you see a South African production, it's in English. Of course, it's for inclusivity's sake. But when the French produce a production, they're not going to produce it in English.
Yeah.
You are just going to take it as is. And we need more of our own productions in our languages. But we also, coupled with that, need to develop audiences that are going to watch it. Because it's of no use I produce it and no one is going to watch it. We've got to build the interest. And so, yes, families, individuals, high net worth individuals need to commit money.
I've seen how the Venda language was elevated by the television drama Mubango.
Absolutely.
Because before that, the language itself was suffering, and some of us could not even speak in Jivenda because you ran a risk of being arrested.
Yeah, yeah. Because
I remember one time in Johannesburg, I was walking around, and this policeman just came to me, and he spoke in Sepedi. He said, "Aritibaneng."
Hey.
And then I looked at it and I said, "But Muhageshu, how would you go ring?"
Hey.
And when I said that, he realized, oh, okay.
Next. and I mean, we don't realize it, but these shows help us break down stereotypes.
Yeah.
They carry the culture to us. They debunk certain myths, that people had. I mean, it was a commonly held thing, and yes, we ought to be necessarily ashamed of ourselves as other people groups, but generally, when you thought about a Shitsonga speaking person or Chivenda speaking person, you thought, okay, but they are darker in complexion. Across hues, across different complexions, and we have shows, we have literature, we have conversations to thank for that.
Exactly.
We must be able to see the differences within cultures. But we can only do that when people are able to commit money
and
to produce this.
How are universities dealing with this? Do you think they are also sleeping on the job here?
Oh, I really think they're trying.
Yeah.
Really think they're trying. You have UniZulu, UKZN. People are producing PhDs in isiZulu about isiZulu and about other issues. You have the University of the Northwest. You had Dr. Bowe, who produced the paper Strana. You also have, I think it's NMU and other institutions where people have produced papers in East Coast.
Yeah, and recently the University of Venda
had
the lady who acts on Mubango as well.
Hey. So all of those are steps that we are taking. And we must just increase the number of people that are taking those steps.
Yeah.
And again, we must be unapologetic about it.
But I think somehow what you're saying could also be right to say that, have we built enough interest?
Yes.
Because it might just be an issue of the focus, because we are shifted into the AI, the engineering, and so forth. But then we are neglecting the part which brings us to our own home and all of this particular heritages.
Imagine what would have happened on the 26th of March in 2020 if every night at 7 p.m. we had a program that was going to discuss certain cultures, certain values.
Yeah.
For 21 days straight.
During lockdown.
You have nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
You might as well listen, you might as well participate. And at that point, you are doing a social engineering.
Yeah.
And you are encouraging these conversations to happen. But every night, you focused on a particular people group and you said, this is who we are. This is who they are. This is what's going on. And you built interest around that. What would have happened by now?
In schools, I know rural schools have those languages and indigenous languages and all that, but it looks like when the cohorts move out of the secondary schools, the numbers just shift completely and shrinks to very few individuals who have an interest into that. So are we saying that perhaps at high school level, we might not be doing as much canvassing for our languages, for these learners to even make a choice to say, this is what I'm going to do?
You know, the other thing that we don't necessarily speak about a lot is language policy in schools. And for instance, we don't realize that parents set language policy. It's a school governing body matter. And parents are the ones that choose Afrikaans, not learners. It's the parents of the learners that decide what the language policy is going to be. So again, you have that sense of inferiority to say, what good, and this is a question that's been asked, what good will it do my child to know Setswana? But again, if you understand, for instance, that Setswana has astronomy in it. There are names for the planets in Sesotho. So are you saying that it's a lesser language than others? And I'm not romanticizing our languages. They need to be developed, absolutely.
Perhaps the argument could be, after what happens when you have actually got that, what opportunities do you have?
And it's an entire develop the language. You then have got to be able, to have people who can study in tertiary in the language, in whatever field. And then they can open up businesses that will allow them to speak in the language again. So that entire ecosystem needs to be created, and then they'll be fine.
And we must get to the point where we agree to say that it's going to hurt a little bit,
but we must do it.
But we must.
We must.
If we have to have Afrikaners consultants to come and teach us how to do it,
absolutely.
Let's get them to come and teach us.
Absolutely.
They may not know how our language is spoken or what traditions are governing within our language, but they would actually give us a framework.
Yes.
Through which we can actually.
And there's no shame in asking. Because when they developed the Broederbond, I think around 1948, 47, it's 3 African guys that met in Parktown in Johannesburg. And they decided this is the direction we're going. And from those 3 gentlemen, we have a lot that's going on. You know, the date might not be 1948. That's when apartheid became legal. But you have the intention.
Remember a couple of years ago, there was also an issue about Afrikaner music selling much better than all other.
Who's buying it?
The Afrikaners themselves. and they went all out to buy that music.
Yes.
In that way, when he's playing it in the car, he's already
connecting,
teaching his child to do the same.
Absolutely. Afrikaner music, Indian music, Afrikaner theater, Indian theater, well attended. It's just when you get to Zulu theater, it's like there's a problem. And there is no problem. We've got to build the audience. And then after we've built the audience, then we come and we build the product. And, you know, it sounds almost autocratic of me, but it should be part of your service to say, have you gone
but
to
also,
watch this?
Do you find that politics also is becoming a hindrance to some of these things?
Oh, absolutely. I think we politicize the issues that we shouldn't. I think at some level we just got to agree. You know, we've got to be able to say, as all these political parties, to say, look, this is where we're going. And we agree on it. We don't even have to debate it. We agree language and culture needs to be preserved. How we go about it, then we can speak about modalities.
And I think if it comes from politicians, so to say, even the sourcing of the funding, it might just be, and I'm looking at it, you might find that there's lots of money that actually goes back to treasury simply because people don't know how to access that funding.
And also, even if they access it, you know, there are directorates within the DSEC with language and cultural preservation. And they're given a budget, but their budget is very small. And they can only do so much, I suppose, with that budget. I hold no brief for DSEC.
Yeah.
But I think that we've got to get corporate South Africa on board.
Yeah.
You see, if we can get the private sector to fund language development,
Yeah.
in the same way that you have Afrikaners who own businesses, taking a portion of that business's income and funding cultural preservation.
Yeah.
For as long as we make it a government thing, we make it a whoever else thing, corporate South Africa will continue as well to say, "Bah, this is our decor, this is the way we do things.
Yeah.
We're not going to be interested in this thing." But when you then have someone who's able to take your product
Yeah.
as a business to a person and explain it to them in their own language,
I can imagine how children will feel like when they have dance competitions throughout the year. Not just dance practices
Yes.
prior to Heritage Day.
Yes,
Throughout the year,
Absolutely.
knockouts of dances, traditional dances and so forth, and it just becomes a standard.
absolutely. I mean, those things existed.
Mm.
You know, sometimes our parents speak about how they were forced to go into choirs, they were forced to go into dance groups or sports things,
Yeah.
and it was a pride thing.
In Gauteng, a few years ago, they had what they called Seharuna Cultural Festival.
Mm.
And that was brilliant. I don't know where it went, but
Again, because we wanted it perhaps to just, it's like a once-off thing.
yeah.
Culture becomes, or heritage becomes a once-off thing.
Or it becomes an issue that because so and so has initiated that.
Yes.
When other people come in, then
Yes.
they bring it down because it's not their brainchild.
And I think also we've got to get out of the view that says if Zulu people are promoting being Zulu, it means they are being exclusionary. They are
Yeah.
not.
No.
There's nothing wrong with a Venda person promoting Chivenda, ways, cultures, and anything to do with. It's not being tribalist.
Yeah.
It's just pride.
Mm.
When the Movenda says that being Venda is better than being Motswana,
Then there is a
that's
problem.
where you have the issue.
Yeah.
But in the private space, as Vavenda, you can say, no, look here. We are the best. Our food is the best.
Yeah.
And King, we've got the best everything.
When last did you eat ting?
I don't like it. You see, that's where it becomes very tricky for me to maintain my Setswana-ness. I really don't like it. I'm so sorry to all the Botswana people who are, I really don't like it. I like chotlo though.
Yeah.
Yeah, chotlo emonate because it's meat, I suppose, that shredded meat, if you will. Morogo lona wa jecha. But again, maybe let me pose the question different. Well, are those things indigenous to us?
Well,
Because pap is not indigenous to us. We found, like, people brought it here as a staple, we planted, and then we moved.
yeah.
You know, it's the issue of culture is a very interesting one. very
I
interesting.
just had to bring this.
Yes.
Because last week I had a group of students who were preparing cultural stuff and they for their heritage
Yes.
course,
Mm.
and they prepared nice food,
Yes.
and I tasted a number of all that,
Mm.
and I was just reminded of my mother when I was eating this muroho,
Yes.
which is actually where they put in nuts in it.
Yes.
And the last time I
Yes.
ate it, it was
Yes.
when my mother was still alive, and
Sure.
that should be prior
Sure.
2002.
Sure. Sure. And food carries memories with it.
It carries
It
memories.
does. It
Yeah.
does.
And these are some of the things that if you look at our children, because those things are no longer cooked on a regular basis. We end up losing them, and nobody gets to know what this is. It only comes back
Yeah.
a year after a year
Yeah.
after a year, and before you know it, in 2022
It's gone.
there will be about 6 items, but
Yeah.
in 2023 it's now 4.
Yeah.
And bit by bit they are moving away.
And our indigenous culinary arts, if I were to call it that, are vast
Yeah.
and completely amazing. We've got to get to the place where we explore that, and we explore it in its entirety. You have these cuisines and you have people getting Michelin stars and so forth for the restaurants that they run or the cuisine that they've produced. How many of that, or how is Africa?
Yeah.
We strive so much for Eurocentric standards, even when it comes to food.
Yeah.
But how do we develop even the palate for that to say? I once was in Uganda. They have this very sort of slimy pap.
Yeah.
That's sort of made of nuts as well. Man, I tasted that thing and I was reminded of Ding, and I said, no. But again, it was good to see that this is what people eat.
Yeah.
This is what they do. And it's like, it's only here in South Africa where you have this Eurocentric kind of way of doing things.
Yeah.
Such that, people want to, there's nothing wrong with, lasagna and spaghetti and mince, and it's fine.
Yeah.
But are we able to create quick African authentic meals?
Yeah. No, and that challenge is, if you look at it, the majority of that, I don't know whether it's an issue of us not being acclimatized to that, or our bodies not actually ready for that.
Yeah.
Because the majority of times when we indulge more on that, we get much sicker than when we
and you'd find that food is good for you. It's grown from the ground. You just grab it and you. There's a particular moroho that was growing in my garden, and my friend once said, I'm going to cook this thing for you, and you think it's a weed, but actually it's really, really good.
Yeah.
And I ate it and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Literally, she just plucked it and she put it in the pot. Done.
Yeah.
And that's how our people lived.
Eish.
And it's sophisticated. It's not primitive. It's not barbaric.
Yeah.
It's actually the height of civilization.
It is in the heat of the nation.
Yes.
And because we are this kind of people, embracing them brings us into unity.
Absolutely.
Just as much as you find in institutions, especially yesterday and on Friday.
Yes.
Where institutions, even in companies and banks, you found people dressed in different colors, and it brought some kind of vibe to it.
What if they did that every day?
What if they do it every day?
What prevents a company from saying, no, our official dress code is going to be traditional?
Yeah.
There's nothing. It's just whiteness. It's just Eurocentrism that says, no, this is office wear.
Hey, if we were to talk about this topic, we would actually talk for years.
Absolutely.
And when we come back, I want us to talk a little bit about you as we close the show.
Sure.
Mr. Mkhase is still here, and we are taking a short break. When we come back, we are closing this conversation tonight. Do you want to start a creche or a daycare center? Or maybe you and your staff want to improve your skills and qualifications in early childhood development? EduBuild is your answer. We have 20 years experience in skills development and offer professional training courses for ECD level 4 and 5. You don't need prior training or even matric certificate to register. Our classes are on Saturdays at TCN Center in Zwerani. Upon completion, you will be registered with the South African Council of Educators, or SAIS in short. Registration for 2022 is open. Remember, no matric certificate is required. Call us on 068-392-1730, or you can WhatsApp us on the same number, 068-392-1730. EduBuild Institute, Thohoyandou campus, situated at TCN Center, Zwerani. EduBuild. Reach, teach, and build a child today. Welcome back to Resuscitation Leadership Conversations. My name is Maano Ramadwa. This is what we do every single Sunday afternoon. And as we wrap up with my guest tonight, we just want to take you a little bit into what he does. Pastor Mkhase, sometimes some people would actually think that, no, we're just having a conversation. But there is more that you teach. There is more that you speak about when it comes to this whole issue of heritage and so forth.
Yeah, for me, So yes, there are times, sort of every Monday around 7 p.m. on my own Facebook page where there are teachings that I give, sermons that are conducted. And my particular outlook is one that is centered around being African,
Yeah.
and how our Africanness is God ordained,
Yeah.
and our spirituality is God ordained,
Yeah.
actually. So from time to time, I mean, there are three main sort of areas, if you will. On the one is men.
Yeah.
There are a couple of organizations that sometimes I do work with, and so I'm very passionate about speaking about that. But again, it's linked to our Africanness, it's linked to our heritage,
Yeah.
and how we reclaim that manhood. It's also prophetic, if you will, consultations
Yeah.
that people sometimes have. People will say, look, I'm dreaming this, I'm seeing this, I'm
Yeah.
doing that, and we're able to help. Because again, that's also a heritage thing. It's about
Yeah.
realigning families,
Exactly.
and saying, okay, family X, what's going on? And how can we realign? Because there are dreams, there's this, there's that, or the other. And then, of course, in other spaces, there's communication work that I do,
Yeah.
emceeing, voiceovers, and so forth, and speaking, like we're doing now, around issues of heritage, around issues of tradition, and the marriage between that and spirituality in the main, or that and manhood, also as well. Yeah.
Very interesting stuff as you mentioned, because the man.
Mm.
The man is, if we are to talk about the heritage of a man,
Mm.
there's a particular position
Yes.
that man has been actually ordained into,
Mm.
and we seem to get lost to that.
And I might say something that a lot of people don't like hearing. For instance, that position. Let's take one thing that we absolutely love saying, that men are providers.
Yeah.
At a biblical level, I disagree.
Yeah.
Men are custodians of what God provides.
Well,
and if you say it like that, it takes the pressure off of you to provide.
You can say that again and again.
Because now we have men who have imprisoned themselves, as it were, taking from the title of your book, imprisoned by yourself. They have put themselves into the jail that says, I am not a man if I don't have money.
If I don't have money.
And we've got to get to a manhood in that Ramadwa that is free of women and free of money.
Yeah.
Because then we'd be able to say, what exactly is manhood?
Yeah.
Where we're not living for the approval of women and we're not living for the approval of money.
Yeah.
Then we're able to get to, okay, what is this manhood? What is this vision casting? What is this thing? What does it mean to be a man made in the image of God?
Yeah.
To go, to dominate, to, have dominion.
Yeah.
Was it to dominate each other? No.
No.
It was to dominate the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and every creeping thing. So how do we get men to realize that you're not called to being a provider? You're called to being a steward of what God provides.
Because God is the provider. And
exactly.
I hear this many, many times, and people will say, before God actually brought a wife to the man, he gave man a job.
Yes. And it's because, again, it's this economic system.
Yeah.
There's a difference between a job and work.
Yeah.
Work is something you're going to do until you die.
Yeah, exactly.
But a job you'll have until you retire. and we've got to be able to have those conversations. We've got to be able to encourage men to open up spaces where we can speak amongst ourselves, by ourselves.
And be able to embrace their heritage.
Absolutely.
That's exactly
Absolutely.
what the point we are talking about.
Absolutely, because we do have it.
Yeah.
As a parting shot, black families were not born to be poor. We weren't. We have a heritage of wealth creation, like your friend was saying. We have a heritage of dominion. We have even on the African continent. I was saying to someone, and people will differ with me if they want to, that colonialism and slavery, if we were to take the entirety of African history, is just but the afternoon. Or the evening. The rest of the day speaks about African conquest, speaks about African development and the beauty of pre-colonial African history. And we've got to get into that so that we're able to say, where do we come from? We don't come from just slavery and colonialism. Prior to that, who were we? And if we can get to that, then we're able to say, okay, we must now fight to get back there.
We existed for a greater purpose.
Absolutely.
And we embraced it.
Absolutely.
And like you're saying, we dominated in that
Yeah.
space.
And that's our heritage.
Yeah.
Our heritage is not slavery.
Mm-mm.
Our heritage is not poverty.
Yeah.
Our heritage is not intra-tribal conflict. Our heritage is not inferiority. Our heritage, much like any other people group on the earth, is a beautiful heritage.
Yeah.
It's a wealthy heritage. It's a dominion heritage. It's about us being exactly that which God has called us to be.
You're just reminding me of a verse in the book of Genesis when Moses in the book of Exodus when I think it's Exodus when God said, I have already spoken to man.
Yes.
There is one who is a specialist in welding.
Yes.
There is one who is a specialist in melting gold. There is one.
Yes.
And because those people existed.
That's heritage.
That's heritage.
Purpose is family divine or family defined.
Yeah.
And it's God breathed, and that's our heritage. Once we discover that, as families will thrive.
Yeah.
Completely.
Hey. Let us actually just accept that this topic is a great topic.
Absolutely.
But how do you actually praise yourself as a mokhas? As we close.
No, really, rona re batho ba bo setebete. Rona re bo khamela mutleng. Re bo pholla ditlhare. Re ditlo. That is who we are. Re ditlo.
Nendi mudau wa chieni. Chanya funga che.
This one. That's exactly what we need.
And that's exactly what it is, because we are the lions.
Yeah.
And knowing that, just having that revelation, I became free.
Yes.
Knowing that when is a lion demoralized?
Yeah.
Because a lion would never go hungry.
Exactly.
If it has to hunt.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what I carry every day.
And this is the thing that Ramadwa, if you know that you are a lion and I didn't know that I'm an elephant, I'm going to be scared of you as a lion. Right?
See that?
But now it's easy for me to quickly say, it takes 6 of you to bring one of me down. But those are the things that we've got to be able to pass down.
Yeah.
Even if a person's totem is a warthog or an ant or a leopard, there is beauty in all of them.
There is beauty in all of them.
So we've got to be able to then take from there as well. What are the characteristics of a lion that you embody?
Yeah.
Are you a solitary person?
Exactly.
Are you a person that is able to hunt and then bring it back to the family? But do you have times where you walk off by yourself and then you come back? Because that's what a male lion does.
That's what a male lion does.
Are you polygamous?
Well, I come from a polygamous family, so I just rejected it myself.
Yeah. But it's all of those things to say, for instance, if you think about people who are elephants, as it were, you'll find a strong matriarch.
Yeah.
Because Ditlo generally are led by a female. So there'll be a strong matriarch. In the Setswana nations, you'll find them.
Yeah.
And
exactly. Thank you very much for coming through. This is how we close tonight's show. And of course, next week we will actually be sitting right at the same time with a guest. And just before I go, you need to also be able to check on Pastor Mokhase on the social handles. I know we've been flighting them on the screen, but quickly, you can just give that. Yeah. Go Yamudim. That's exactly how we close it. But before we close it, I just want to remind you that this book is still on sale at 150 Rand each. And all you need to do is to order directly from me on 068 392 1730. Or you can go onto my website, www.Maano and you follow the link until you make your payment. Believe me, as soon as the payment comes through, I receive a message and then I dispatch the book. That's exactly how we do it. But generally, I am Maano, resuscitation coach on social media across all platforms. Thank you so much and good night. Do you want to start a creche or a daycare center? Or maybe you and your staff want to improve your skills and qualifications in early childhood development? EduBuild Institute Thohoyandou campus is your answer. We have 20 years experience in skills development and offer professional training courses for ECD level 4 and 5. You don't need prior training or even matric certificate to register. Our classes are on Saturdays at TCN Center in Zwerani. Upon completion, you will be registered with the